And welcome back, students. As we dive into our final lesson here with Python, we're going to touch on lists, arrays, and also our good old friend sorting. So let's start off first by talking about lists, because if you remember, one of our last basic elements that we talked about when we talked about Java was that of the array. Well, Python doesn't directly have arrays, but it does have something called lists. Now we can work with arrays, and we'll look at that in a minute, but it prefers to use lists. So if I want to make a list, I'm just going to go ahead and, of course, make a list. And you, of course, can make multiple lists of different things, different values. And so as I, let's say, make a list equals, let's just give it some values. Let's just say, let's use some strings. Hello, goodbye, the end. All right. And I'm just going to make another list, list 1 equals, and let's do a numeric one. All right. And let's just do 12, 5, -9, and how about 45? Okay. So there's my list. Now let's go ahead and print list. And let's give this a run. All right. So I printed the list, which printed out hello, goodbye, and the end. Now, if I attempt to print out the other list item, print list 1, you can see that it also just outputs the items in the list. So it's really simple to output a list. Just print it out. There's no like having to march through each index of the array like we're used to doing a lot of times with arrays. This is a lot more like when we're using array lists. It's very easy to use. We can even, of course, like let's say I want to put out a size. I believe that there's just a size value there. Let's just see if that works. No, it says it doesn't have an attribute called size. And we'll just try the other one. Now, again, I'm doing this live, so I don't remember off the top of my head without cheating and looking at the references here. Okay, so size is not defined. So I'm just going to close this for a second here. So we'll come back to that in a second here. But we now have created lists. We can print them out. Let's say we want to update an element of that list. So I'm going to go back to list 1. And I want to, let's say, update 45, all right, which is, of course, element number 3, because remember, list started at 0. So I'm going to say list 3. And I'm going to set that equal to, instead of 45, let's make that 43. Okay. If I reprint list 1, it should give me the new value. All right. So you can see we had 12, 5, -9, 45, but now we have 12, 5, -9, and 43. So as simple as that, I've updated the list values. Now, of course, you'll see in here that we can also delete the list elements, which is pretty simple to do. You just use the delete command. So this is what allows you to remove a list element. Again, this is very similar to array lists that we're used to working with. So I'm just going to now delete, let's say, list item number 2. Oops, that's 2. All right. And if I try and then do a print list 1, this one, there you go. F5, you can see now it says 12, 5, and 43. It removed -9. It was a quite simple command to use, and it's gone. All right. So removing an item from a list is very simple to do. Now, if we look down here, there are some other basic operations that we can do, such as we can get the length, which is our size command that we're used to doing. Length, of course, just returns how many elements are inside of it. There's concatenation, repetition, membership, iteration. You have a bunch of things such as indexing, slicing, do matrix operations. Here's a bunch of the functions. So, for example, we can get the max value, min value. We can even do like reverse and sorts, which we'll talk about in a minute here. All right, but before we get to the list.sort, I want to segue a second and talk about arrays, because arrays were something we're very familiar with from our Java side. Now, as you noticed in this class here, we didn't use an array. We used a list, which again is very similar to that on an array list. Now we can, of course, use the elements within inside this, but this is really kind of using the list structure. So it's not a true like array. So if I wanted to do an array and be able to do, let's say, the classic bubble sort where I did a nested for loop, I can use that with the array. But if you notice down here, there's a command that we have to import because arrays are not by default part of the Python library. So we say from array import, and we put an asterisk. So it's a little different than how we imported the math class, which I think was import math. So we are importing this array library here to be able to use. So when we create an array, it's really, again, pretty simple to what we're used to using. So I'm going to say like array 1 equals, let's just say an array. I could probably say int. And then I can, of course, define it. So I comma bracket, and let's just say 1 comma 2 comma 3 comma 5. Okay. And then if I want to print this now, I can't just do print array1 because this is not a list. So if I tried to do this in its current form, you can see I is not defined. It doesn't know what I is. So let's minimize that. Because I did not define it as a character here. Okay, now it says list object cannot be interpreted as an integer. All right, so if I change this to array, like in the example, see, now it outputs it. But again, part of the issue with that is that we were attempting to print out exactly what was in this variable. So what we actually want to do is not just print that out. We have to do, just like in the example here, we have to do a loop. So I could do a for each loop. I could do a while. We're going to use the for each simply because that's just what the example is. So for x in array 1, we're simply going to print x. And if we run our code, all right, list cannot be interpreted as an integer. All right, so change that back to array. All right, and I got 1, 2, 3, 5. So to use our classic arrays, this is pretty much how we structure them. All right, and if I go and show you another example here, let's see if I still have it open. I think it was in my occurrences class here. Yep, you can see here I have some other arrays that I've been doing. So in here, this is an array that just fed in a value based upon an input line of numbers. So it parsed a string apart and pulled the numbers in. So there's obviously different ways that you can work with different things inside of Python. But here's a quick example with that. Now, so let's get down to the sorting business here. So now I have two arrays. One is sorted, one is not. So this, of course, is actually not array. It's a list. I'm just going to change this out. Let's make that like 11 and make this like 31. Just so they're not sorted anymore. Okay. So if I want to sort in Python, it's really easy. Just do .sort, and it's going to sort those numbers. So my list 1, if you remember, had the numbers in it. So just say list1.sort. And if I print list 1, okay, remember we had 12, 5, and 43, but now it's going to be 5, 12, and 43. Right? It's that simple. It's sorted out. Now, of course, with the array type, I'd probably have to go and do some sorting on that, because I can't just say, oh, well, it's array 1, and I'm going to do .sort of that, and let's just say print array 1. You can see that we get a traceback here. So it says array object has no attribute sort. So this is where we'd have to get into using our more usual approaches of like nesting loops and stuff like that. So you still can do it. You still could do like a bubble sort here. But part of the reason why the array objects aren't necessarily used as much is because, one, you have the trade-off of the flexibility that lists do. Because lists, you saw how easy it was to add an item into the list. You can remove an item from the list. So let's try to add something to this. So let's just say list 1 of, let's see, 4. What was the last one we deleted? Actually, we deleted 3, so there's no 3 element. So I'm just going to set that equal to -8. Print list 1. See if this works. All right. Oh, we still have this array sort in here. Probably should take that out. Okay. All right. It says list assignment index out range. So here it's out range of the index, so it's not going to let me add it in. So if I want to add that in, of course, I can insert those objects in. So this is very simple, like appending, for example. So if I want to say list 1 dot append, let's add 8. You can see now we have 8 at the end of our list. All right. So it's, again, very similar to like what we did with array list. You can still, of course, use your classic arrays. That's still a perfectly good, viable option. And I'm going to leave all these resources here for you to be able to look at in regards to sorting. One thing I do want to point out, though, is sorting in reverse order, because it's a really handy thing. Because sometimes you don't want your list to be from smallest to largest. You want to be, for example, from largest to smallest. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a print of list1 dot sort. And what I do is, instead of just saying that, I have to say reverse equals true. And what that does is that it says, hey, reverse the list. So if I run this, we got none. All right. So it's probably because of how I tried to do this. So I probably need to do this and list 1, 5. There we go. So we can't print it after and sort it at the same time. A little bit of food for thought there, but you can see with that simple reverse equals true, I have a reverse command. So easy to use. You didn't have to use any nested loops. You didn't have to use anything like that. Python has some real advantages in terms of some of its simplicity. There are certain things that go in that are trade-offs for being able to use Python. But that's going to be outside the scope of some of the things that we're going to do. We're sticking kind of simple because we're just kind of getting our feet just a little bit wet here, just to kind of give you some ideas of how to do certain things. If you want to pursue Python even more, you're more than welcome to go on your own volition. In fact, if you decide to go into computer science as a career, it's very likely you could encounter Python because it is one of the more popular programming languages. But this is going to kind of wrap up some of the live demo that I have for today's lesson. Again, I'm going to leave those materials up in the lesson plans for you. And with that being said, I will see you next time when we go and talk about C.